Thank you very much. Because due to COVID situation, small problem we are having, and I have to leave. Therefore, before I leave, I want to say a few words. I'm not taking that much time. Uh, First of all, let me really appreciate your efforts to select this topic, very important topic, and Sri Lanka is one of the success stories. You know, this success story really shows the strength of the national health system and country's commitment and our level of investment. And this is a result of a great effort during few decades. And I'm very happy to see that the success, so that our success story is being really disseminated because I was a medical officer of health in a remote area in northwestern province, that is in Kurunagala district, where malaria was really with very, very high prevalence. And I am very proud to say that my medical office of health area was selected to really conduct the first ICON trial in Sri Lanka. So from those days, I was involved, and finally, when we really declared as malaria-free country, so we were very, very proud of it. And I want to say a few words that sometimes being a winner also have many disadvantages, because when it comes to donor funding, now Sri Lanka doesn't get its due place, because we have eliminated, right? But it is really we should realize that it's equally important, and it's very difficult to maintain this status. We are at the face of prevention of reintroduction of malaria, and our director anti-malaria campaign will surely tell you how much effort and how much resources we had to really spend last year when we detected a rare species of a vector when we found just after elimination status. So, however, Sri Lanka is committed to maintain this status, and our political commitment is really excellent, and our dedication by the health officials and also involvement by the good ground level worker is great. So with these words, I want to stop here. And once again, I really appreciate Dr. Suranga Dolamulla's selection of this topic, and I wish all the very best. And I regret that I cannot continue because of the prevailing situation in the country, which is another challenge, and we will face that challenge also courageously. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much, Ravindra, for giving this opportunity in between. Right. Thank you.
Can I ask a question from you before winding up?
Yeah.
Okay. It's really, I know that you are extremely busy today due to back-to-back meetings. So thank you very much for coming for this seminar, even amidst your busy schedule. My question is, it's really, even we are talking about history, we need to talk about current management as well. So I noticed that there's no reduction of funding for malaria, even we have eliminated into year 2015. So how do you maintain this influx of funding in future?
You know, we don't get as that much donor funding this time, and even when though we have a global fund support to other diseases, HIV and TB, but another mechanism for malaria, we have to spend and we have to get it reimbursed. And even other donor funding, we don't get our priority for malaria because we have eliminated that. But our infrastructure we have strengthened, and our focal agency with its Directorate of Anti-Malaria Campaign we are maintaining, and our education and our good planning and funding from GOSL, that we continue. Otherwise, we don't have that much donor funding now as we get for other diseases. That is why I said sometimes being a winner have disadvantages as well.
All right. I think that, yes. And one very short question. It's now, how do you get this experience, especially malaria eradication in Sri Lanka, in terms of managing current COVID-19 pandemic? Is there any sort of a support, any experience since?
You know, when we opened the country for other Sri Lankans to return to the country, actually, we strengthened our surveillance at the port of entry. And we were able to screen for malaria as well, because they are at one place at the quarantine centers, and we were able to detect malaria also. And we are utilizing every opportunity to maintain our status of prevention of reintroduction of malaria. So though COVID is going on, it's a new normal, we are adapting new normal to live with COVID, but we never underestimate or forget other all disease prevention programs and our routine medical services and preventive services in the primary healthcare infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lakshmi Somatunga, participate in this event. I think now we have come to the panel discussion and Q&A session. Before that, I think I forget to hand over the floor to Professor Rajit in terms of conducting his rest of his presentation. Professor Rajit, are you there?
Just a few minutes, because most of it has already been told by Gauri and Jayanati. Just to wrap up, I mean, basically this was told by Gauri, so I'm not going to repeat it. Again, here I'd like to highlight the last few years of the number of malaria cases, and then when the civil war ended. Actually, in 2000, by 2004, we had gone through the pre-elimination phase, and we could have moved into the elimination phase, but due to the civil war, we did not do that at that time. Then again, Dr. Gauri has told all the strategies and implementation of these strategies, and basically it is nothing but good public health practice. Was the implementation of good public health practice was our success story. Right, so what lay behind the success of the malaria elimination effort? We have already, there is a publication on technical and operational underpinnings of malaria elimination from Sri Lanka. Let's look at some data from 62 onwards, and we wanted to see whether malaria elimination costs more than malaria control. So in this graph, we took two periods from 1982 to 1989, and the second period from 2002 onwards to 2008. And we took these two starting points when the incidence was similar at the beginning of the period. So what we wanted to know was why after 2002, the incidence came down, and in 1980, when the incidence was at a similar level, why it increased. So we wanted to see if the amount of money spent for malaria elimination was more than what was spent for malaria control. And so basically, these were the number of cases in the first period, and here we have the number of cases in the second period. And when we calculated the expenditure for malaria control and malaria elimination, it was similar. So basically, there was no difference between the amount spent for malaria control and malaria elimination. So then we looked at the proportion of external versus government funding for malaria during both periods. And during both the periods, the external funding was about 24%, ranging from 13 to 38%. So during the period 1980 to 1989, it was mainly bilateral funding from USAID, governments of UK, Netherlands, Japan, and these were dispersed strictly in accordance with government regulations. Whereas in the period 2002 to 2010, the funding was mainly from GFATM, and they had their own disbursement rules and agreed terms based on the strategic plan. So during the 2002 to 2010 period, there was flexibility in disbursement of funds, of external funds, whereas in the 1980 to 89 period, they were constrained by rigid rules of government. If you look at the expenditure categories in 2010 and 1989, in 1989, most of the funds were spent on insecticides and diagnostics and treatment. In contrast, if you take in 2010, most of the funds were spent on management and other costs, which were very little in 1989. So is this the difference that made elimination possible? Right. So some key lessons, some have already been shown. Three things which I would like to highlight here is the program must be agile and flexible to respond to ground realities. There should be adequate financial support. At least the component of it needs to be flexible in its disbursement. And monitoring and evaluation plays a critical role in improving program management. So the other important key point was in 2010, there was a dedicated budget for M&E. Right. As a postscript, we achieved malaria certification on the 6th of September 2016, but there was an introduced case of malaria reported in December 2018. So this was a single introduced case, and a very efficient system was in operation that prevented further spread of the infection. Infection was detected in Monaraga. And I thought I should include this as well. In the COVID times, we think because the airport is closed, we should not have a problem of imported malaria. But if you see the few flights that are coming in, are bringing in Sri Lankans as part of the repatriation process. And some of these people are coming from malaria endemic countries. All arrivals are quarantined for 14 days at a government supervised center, plus they have to undergo an additional 14 days of home quarantine supervised by the area public health inspector. Then all persons from malaria endemic countries are screened for malaria in the quarantine centers themselves. So this is a very efficient surveillance system. Entomological surveillance and vector control is conducted in areas around the quarantine centers. And if based on entomological surveillance, appropriate vector control measures are conducted. And all positive malaria cases are followed up by the anti-malaria campaign as per national protocol. So I thought this is also important to tell at this point because we are facing a completely different situation right now. Finally, I'd like to thank Professor Kamini Mendis for sharing some of her slides, and thank you very much.
Currently, we have 3 speakers, and along with Dr. Prasad Ranavira, he is the Director Anti-Malaria Campaign in Sri Lanka. So it's open for questions, those who are at the YouTube link also. Meantime, anyway, I have got one comment from Professor Krishant Veerasurya. He was the professor in pharmacology, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka, about 20 years back, and worked in WHO CRO for more than 10 years as a specialist in medicines. So there are so many. There are some comments received from current viewers, and one is from Professor Krishant Veerasurya. He mentioned that the success of malaria control in Sri Lanka is due to embedded universal health coverage in the system from 1940s. And he made a little query about, or he made a comment about the malaria drugs used during 1940s to 1960s. It's not chloroquine, it's camoquine during that time. So he has mentioned that those camoquine also supplied by USAID. So going into the Q&A session, I have really several questions from the panelists. The first one would be, it's for really everyone, and I think everyone can contribute a little bit on this one, this question. My question is, how do you explain the Sri Lankan contribution or contribution of Sri Lanka in terms of reshaping the international malaria control program? So what is the Sri Lankan contribution towards the other countries or international organization in terms of controlling their malaria elimination or malaria control programs? Can I ask first from Gauri?
Thanks, Saranga. It's a good question. I can think of many ways. Being a small country, tiny island with only 20 million people, we showed to the world, all malaria endemic countries, if you have a will, political commitments, and all the strategies, then you can do the elimination. So you don't need hi-fi sophisticated tools or the drugs to the elimination. That is one way Sri Lanka showed. The second is we have produced several malariologist experts. So now they are working in many countries in the world. That includes regional malaria officers, they have played a vital, important roles. So that is the second thing. The third thing is now our people, our experts, they are working in policy making and at higher level in international organization. So although there are no tailor-made control methods or the strategies, each and every country is unique. But the Sri Lankan example, I know personally, I worked in many African countries also when I was in Geneva. So they took Sri Lanka as an example, but however, they they tailor-made, they took the experience and invited some of us, and then they create their own strategies. So this way I can see that Sri Lanka helped a lot to the international communities and other countries in the world.
It's really, I think you have really made a nice comment about Sri Lankan contribution. The first one is our experience in terms of managing in a low budget and the procedures, what we adapted. The secondly, the expertise, how we have given to the organization, especially the WHO, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to ask from Ravindra Jainetti, in your experience in micro level, how do you think that those things really contributed in terms of malaria elimination or malaria control programs in other countries? Have they adapted, or have they have anything, have you any commented, or what is your contribution, or how do you think that those?
Dr. Suranga, because I have some experience in Bhutan, I went there for a WHO assignment and to prepare their system for this certification and documentation. I prepared, but what I feel is that the Sri Lankan situation is completely different from the other countries, because mainly they are landlocked countries and Sri Lanka is an island. So our challenges was not as their challenges, because our main challenges was the ethnic war and also the mega projects, and we have unstable malaria. But in some countries, the main problem is they are landlocked countries, so lot of population mobility is there, and migrant populations are there, so their influence is very much so you can't prevent that. So you have to develop your systems so that you can track these risk populations and follow them up, and those things you have to do. So as I said, that there are certain things we have missed actually. The documentation at micro level we have not done. So we have to encourage those countries to prepare themselves for this their systems. First, even their micro level, they have to be trained so that, and also they have to be encouraged to document their experiences, and those things you have to do the countries. And also this now, unlike us, the guidelines, there are many comprehensive guidelines are prepared by WHO for elimination, and these guidelines have the thing is that each country has to tailor-made to suit their situations, because now every country, recently I got a appointment at this Lao PDR, and they are in a very good question, because they actually foreseeing this. They have prepare for they are going to prepare a roadmap for malaria WHO certification, and also they have national response guidelines, national surveillance and response guidelines they are prepared. and they are going to train these all the provincial and district level people on this national surveillance and response guidelines, and also they are going to they are going to train their people, they build their capacities so that they can implement these surveillance and response guidelines, etc. So I think most of the countries are in the right track, and as Sri Lanka, we can help actually, because we have a lot of experience in especially in this elimination and get ready for the WHO certification, those things, and even POR state. We are in very good position to help them.
Thank you, Janati, and it's for Professor Rajit. And I would like to ask the historiography or literature about malaria control activities in Sri Lanka written by various scholars. Is it enough for, do you see that any sort of gaps in history in terms of malaria control activities?
There is a good record of formal malaria control activities that began after 1911. I think most of it is recorded, and there are even publications on the 1934-35 epidemic written by one Dr. Wickramasuriya. He's the one who actually first published this congenital malaria theory. Just to go back to the other earlier question that you asked, the others, I think the best lesson that we can show the world is that even if you are a tropical country, you can still eliminate malaria. And I think the more important lesson to learn is what happened in 1963. If you let the pedal off, if you let your foot off the pedal, you're going to get devastated again. So if you're looking at elimination, it has to be a concerted, concentrated effort, and you have to ensure that it goes right up until there. Because the resurgence that occurred in 1967, we took another 50 years to completely eliminate malaria. So I think that by itself is an important lesson to the rest of the world.
Okay. I would add a few more things about that. About the Great Malaria Epidemic, I think Margaret Jones has written a chapter in one of the books about Sri Lankan healthcare system. And later on, I have seen another scholarly work from Theo Silva about the malaria control in Sri Lanka in 1960s, 70s, 80s. So, but I can see that there are sort of gaps in history. I think it should be written by somebody. And I have got another question. It's from Dilip. It's from Dilip Lienage. It's really, and his question is, what are the current procedures in terms of managing the imported cases, and even not even in imported cases, even sometimes we get the new cases. How do you manage those things? It's over to you, Dr. Prasad. Are you there?
Yeah. Thank you, Suranga. Actually, in the now Sri Lanka in the POR phase, we get the imported cases. This year also we have detected 26 cases so far. and then actually our one main strategies we are adopted is the increased surveillance system and case management. Actually, regarding the case management, all the cases of imported cases are managed by the anti-malaria campaign, not by the any other mainly by the anti-malaria campaign. We give the guidance, and not by the general practitioners. They can't manage these cases. We give the same priority to the case patients admitted to government sector and private sector, both same priority. Drugs are free of charge to both sector, and investigations are done free of charge, same level. And also we train our public health laboratory technicians in both government sector and private sector free of charge. We give regular training for them. And also our we follow up these patients, whether they detected in private sector or government sector in a same manner. And also, as Professor Ayatha Vikram Singh informed, that we have detected the 10 cases during the quarantine period. And that was a great achievement, I think, for our campaign. And we have advised all our regional malaria officers to continue monitoring of all these people who released from these quarantine centers, not only the diagnosed cases, but all the people who return from endemic countries, follow up these patients for a period of 1 year. That's in the case management, standard case management, standard drugs, protocol management. Then other thing is that every case we, at the end of each month, we discuss at the case review committee meeting, we discuss each case, and where we have any lapses, any failures in detection and managing the timeliness, everything we detect, and we advise all our the people who involved whether in the government, in the hospitals, and also our regional malaria officers to take the advice. If anything, any mistake detected, we'll advise them to take measures to not to repeat these mistakes. That way we have very good control case management system. And also the parasitic surveillance mobile clinics, we continue even during the COVID season situation, we continue our surveillance system, and also vector control, and also the urban vector control measures in the northern province, and also Kalmane region in Sri Lanka. We continue during the our phase. I think continuous case management and surveillance are the main key factors of our success and maintaining the malaria-free status after the elimination phase.
Thank you, Prasad. I think according to your elaboration, it's the quantum of work is less, but still you are working in a pace where you want to control resurgence or any sort of imported cases. It will really hamper the current malaria management project. So moreover, I just want to elaborate a little bit more on, I think we have only a couple of minutes, only very, very simple answer from you. So what about the funding? Do you get enough sort of money from the government and the other institution or other foreign funding agencies in terms of managing those activities?
Yeah, actually, the Global Fund is, as Dr. Lakshmi Somatunga, Madam said earlier, we have a now reimbursement system, new funding system that government of Sri Lanka has to spend, and the next year they evaluate our control activities and then reimburse the fund. Actually, for the last year, 2019, we got $875,000 from the Global Fund. In addition, WHO also support us to for the funding, and the rest of the funding is done by the government of Sri Lanka. And we get, I think government has given priority to malaria activities, even though because they understand, they know that if the outbreak comes, it will be very difficult to control. In 2018 December, we got the imported case. Government of Sri Lanka has to spend more than 2 million to counteract that single case. Therefore, the government commitment is there. In addition, I think we have replanned the drug distribution plan and other activities. We have reduced our drug distribution, and our estimated drug cost has come down to certain level. I think these are the very examples, because other countries will have to face once they get eliminated, they come to the eliminated stage, because some drugs prices are very high comparatively, because our requirement is low, then the quoted prices are very high. Then we need some new strategies to take to overcome these issues. And that way, I think we are with government funding. I think after the 2021, we won't get global fund support. Therefore, our government of Sri Lanka has to bear up all the cost of for the malaria control in Sri Lanka. Therefore, gradually, this is a transition period from funding stage to the purely government of Sri Lanka funding.
Thank you.
And face that, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prasad. I think we need to elaborate more and more on malaria activities in Sri Lanka, but time is the biggest limitation for this seminar. I think in future we can arrange another seminar to discuss about the malaria elimination in Sri Lanka. So we have come to the final session of this seminar, and where I would like to appreciate all the speakers. Ravindra Jayanthi, Dr. Gauri Lokugalapattian, and Professor Rajith Wickramasinghe, Dr. Prasad, and finally, Dr. Lakshmi Somatunga. And further, I would like to thank the key figure of this CGHH seminar. It's Professor Sanjoy Bhattacharya. He's the Professor in History of Medicine and Director, Center for Global Health Histories, University of York. Then I'd like to thank the center staff, Anna and Helen, further IT staff, Steve Parker. So lastly, not lastly, it's, may I thank the Wellcome Trust, a global educational charity based in London, UK, for the generous funding support for this seminar. Finally, I would like to appreciate all of you all who participated from YouTube channel for this seminar, and even the interaction from most of the participants. So let me wind up this seminar, and thank you everyone. Good afternoon and good evening.